Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of the Crytek CRB review. Today, we will be looking at the internals and see what makes this gun so special. So there are a lot of things that make the Crytek special, in the essence that it's really different from a lot of other guns. But is the fact that it's different make it actually good? We're about to find out. So we're going to start with the front of the gun and work our way back. In the front, here we got the hop-up unit. Now the hop-up unit's actually pretty cool because it's one of the wheel click designs. It doesn't actually have like the gear design that can be thrown off when you're shooting full auto or even semi-auto, that it sometimes doesn't like to stay put, and it makes your rounds less accurate as a result. This type of design actually helps the hop-up arm to be steady, so that when BBs are being pushed through the hop-up unit and bucking, it doesn't want to push the arm out of alignment, thus messing with your accuracy. This likes to stay put where it's at. Now this hop-up unit is plastic, but it's a very nice plastic. It's not one of those like super cheapy plastics, but it's not one of those super fantastic plastics. It's kind of in between, and I like it, so pretty good to go. Before we move on to the actual barrel, I want to take a look at the actual hop-up bucking itself. Now I have the hop-up unit all the way on, so you can actually see the actual protrusions of the hop-up bucking and all that stuff into the barrel, and it's got this H-style design. It's kind of like KWA's design in the fact that it has these two little bumps here. This actually does help a lot with accuracy with .20s and .25s. Anything past that, at least with the KWA gun, it wouldn't want to actually shoot them far at all. Though it was accurate, it had absolutely no range. This, on the other hand, I don't know if it's different. I've tried .25s in it, I've tried .20s in it. Fantastic accuracy on both, and range as well. So this bucking is actually a pretty good design for a stock bucking, and it gets some good results. Also, it's orange, so that's pretty cool. Now the barrel. The barrel is fantastic as far as I can tell. I believe it is a 6.05 barrel. It has a fantastic crown on it, very well done, and the inside bore is extremely smooth. It's as if they polished this barrel out, and it's just really, really smooth. It's probably one of the reasons why it gets such good accuracy and range, even on .20s and .25s. But this barrel is definitely very nice. I wouldn't replace it unless I absolutely had to. Now the second thing I pulled out was the motor. Now the motor threw a fast one at me when I first pulled it out. When I first pulled it out, I grabbed it and I was like, hey, pretty cool. I tried to turn the pinion and it was really stiff. I was like, wait, is this a neodymium motor? I look inside and it actually has ferrous magnets. Now that's really interesting for one reason, because ferrous magnets aren't normally that strong. These are actually some very strong ferrous magnets. I mean, incredibly strong. So I really don't know what this motor is capable of pulling. I'd say maybe an M130, pretty good. This seems like the gun has a stock M110, and it pulls that with some pretty good trigger response actually for a stock gun. I was kind of impressed. But this motor has an absolute ton of magnetism, and if I had to guess, I'd say the arm, I don't really know what the arm's TPA is. I'd say somewhere around 20, maybe 18 to 20 TPA. Considering the RPS it's getting and the trigger response it's getting, I'd say 18 to 20 TPA is a pretty good guesstimate. Also, the pinion on this thing is one of those PIM pinions. It's not machined, like a CNC machined, it's just a regular pinion, and it is an O-type, just for further reference, and it actually has absolutely no wear on it whatsoever, so that's pretty cool. That must mean that the shimming is pretty good, and we're going to take a look at that soon. Before we move into the gearbox shell, I want to take a look at some things real quick and point them out for you. Okay, so this is the side that the ambidextrous fire selector goes on, and as you can tell, it has this gear here that when you turn the other side, it turns, and it turns the ambidextrous switch with it. And when you turn the ambidextrous switch, it turns this gear that's attached to, turns the smaller one, which in turn goes through the gearbox shell and turns the other one as well. So that's how you have ambidextrous fire control, and it's pretty cool that they add that touch. And a lot of ambidextrous fire control M4s are just weird in the way they're set up. They're not set up efficiently. So they're really weird to take apart, and they're really weird to get back together. This one is actually pretty straightforward. It's not ridiculously stupid or redundant. It actually works pretty well. Cool thing right here is we have the mock bolt here, and it's made out of metal. I think it's just some zinc metal, but it doesn't have to be anything strong. As you can tell by the presence of bearings here and this really cool MOSFET here. We're gonna go over that soon, and yeah. Also, one more thing before we move into the gearbox shell, we can see some radiusing going on here. So it's pretty neat that they radius the gearbox shell, and we're gonna see if they actually did it correctly on the inside. And if you haven't told already, this gearbox shell is pretty different in color as well. It sports a nice gold finish on it, and that's pretty cool in my opinion. I don't like black gearbox shells. They just kind of plain and I work on them all the time. So I like to see new things like, you know, silver, white, or even Retro Arms black gearbox shells. But gold's pretty cool, and as far as I know, Crytek's the first people to do it, so pretty cool. So the wiring here, nothing fancy, just some Tamayas with some 18 gauge wire and a fuse. Now, what's really cool is that the wire that's around the buffer tube and the buffer tube screw is actually protected by this mesh guard, which is really cool because a lot of wires get torn up when you try to reassemble and put back together and then forth and throw the wires through the buffer tube, and you're screwing it down and you notice, oh man, I caught my wires and now they're tore. And that can just stink because that just adds more work to the process than what could have been done. And this mesh guard kind of protects your wires, and that's pretty cool. I like the fact that this does have a mesh guard, and it just makes things... Another noteworthy thing about the electrical system in this gun is the fact that they included a ton, and I mean an absolute ton of heat shrink around these connectors. As you can tell, it looks like they almost triple layered it, which is really cool because a lot of motor connectors, when you're constantly taking apart a gun and putting it back together, over time you wear off the insulation around this, and that can cause a short because a lot of motor plates are metal, and metal to metal is conductive. So you have your positive going up one and your negative going down another, and when they both meet and they short out, that can short out your gun and mess up your electrical system. So it's really kind of cool that they did this just to prevent that from happening. A really cool touch that doesn't cost anything hardly at all, but yet they did it anyway just to kind of show that they wanted to do it. And before we get into the gearbox shell, we got one more thing I want to go over. As you can see here, this gun does have a quick change spring system in it, which is incredibly awesome because I love quick change spring systems, especially when the ball bearing spring guide, especially when the spring guide is ball bearing and metal, because it means it's probably not going to break. And thank God, because you can't find upgrade, quick change spring guides, at least not readily available. So you'd either have to make your own, which would be a big pain in the butt, or you'll have to track down one that exists somewhere in the confines of the internet. The fact that this gun does come with a ball bearing spring guide and it's metal means you're not going to have to upgrade that or replace it unless it's a piece of crap, in which this case, it looks pretty good, so we shouldn't have to replace it unless we're running something crazy. But, like I said, quick change spring guides, always a plus. So I've got the Crytek CRB opened up, and dang, I am really liking what I see. However, there are a few little things that I don't like. We're going to go over every part of the gearbox and talk about every little piece of it. So the very first thing that draws my attention is that this gearbox has a MOSFET built into it. And that is really cool because almost nobody does that, and everybody says that, or major companies say that MOSFETs aren't necessary, and yet here's a company building their guns and throwing in a MOSFET with it, which is just totally awesome. And this isn't one of those crappy JG MOSFETs. This is actually a 3034 based MOSFET, meaning that it's one of the up-to-date versions of MOSFETs. It can run an 11.1 volt just fine. However, I wouldn't necessarily call this gun LiPo ready just because it has a MOSFET. I would definitely reshim it and correct the angle of engagement just so that you can call it LiPo ready. However, it's just really cool this gun comes with a MOSFET. I absolutely hate installing MOSFETs. It's just, I don't like soldering, and so when somebody does it for me, it's fantastic, and especially when they do it right. And now I have been running this gun on an 11.1 volt battery, and there's absolutely no major charring on the trigger contacts. Of course, there's always going to be that little bit there, but this MOSFET is definitely doing its job, and I can definitely tell the results of it when I pull the trigger, and it's very snappy. So definitely this is a really cool plus, and one of the things that makes this gearbox quite literally shine. So here we have Crytek's gear set. Now these gears are about 18:1 ratio, so they're the standard gear set, nothing really fancy going on here. However, these are some really well built gears, and I mean, first impressions, I haven't ran them on any setup, but I would feel comfortable running a DSG on these gears, and also maybe an M150, maybe M160. They just feel great. I'm really liking these gears. I can't really put it into words what I'm trying to convey here, but they're really beefy and they're really tough. I'm really liking them. And huge props to Crytek. This gun is almost perfectly shimmed. I mean, dang. It sounds fantastic and it is shimmed fantastically. The gears, they're shimmed very well, let's just say that. And, like fantastically well, to be honest. And when I'm spinning them inside the gearbox shell, they're very so slightly too tight, and the only reason is because this gun has ball bearings on it, and so when you're on ball bearings you should actually have a little bit more shimming space then absolutely zero space. So these gears don't have hardly any up and down movement, which is kind of a negative, especially when running ball bearings. When you run ball bearings, you need to have ample space so that you're not putting too much stress on the ball bearings when they spin. Though they spin well, they're still not shimmed well because there's not enough space, so they're kind of tight. But other than that, they're all, like, the bevel to pinion contact is perfect, and the spur and sector levels and heights are just also very, very perfect. I mean, it's probably one of the best shimmed guns out there out of the box, and I'm honestly impressed. However, I'm kind of disappointed that there is no sector delay chip on this gun, which may be a reason why this gun is not feeding on full auto on even a 7.4 volt LiPo. So I'm going to stick a sector delay chip in here and see if it does fix it. But let's move on to another part. So just right on top of the gears we have the tappet plate. Now this tappet plate's pretty good, it's pretty flexible, and it shows no signs of wear. It's actually grease built up on the sides there. I thought it was wear, but it's actually just grease. So this tappet plate's doing alright. As far as like longevity, I don't know because I haven't had this gun too long. But I'd say it's going to last you some pretty good amount of time. Shouldn't break out anytime soon. These parts don't normally break, and it's pretty flexible, so it should be good to go. The piston on this gun is actually got some pretty cool stuff going on with it. It actually does have the second to last tooth removed for angle of engagement. I haven't actually checked the angle of engagement. We're going to check that real quick on a video here in a second. But the piston itself is pretty beefy. I mean, it's pretty heavy, but sometimes heavy pistons are actually pretty good as it can help with jewel creep and help your FPS to remain more consistently as well as accuracy. But it's a pretty heavy piston assembly. But it's cool that it does have actually four metal teeth. That's a big plus in my opinion. And it does have a plastic piston head, and the O-ring on it actually does have room to move. I know on some guns the O-rings are so tight in there that they have terrible compression, and just fixing that alone will up the FPS by like 20 or 30. This one is actually just fine, so there's nothing to fix here. Piston head is actually ported. Pretty dang big ports, so that could be one of the reasons why it's getting such consistent FPS. Let's move on to the cylinder assembly now. So the cylinder is about properly volumed. I wouldn't say it's undervolumed or overvolumed, it's about perfect really. And the cylinder head is plastic, and like I said, the tappet plate here is plastic as well. Now the air nozzle is a plastic air nozzle, go figure, and it does not have an O-ring in it, which is meh. It'd be nice if it did have one, but it's already getting such good FPS consistency that it probably doesn't really need one. Before we move on, like to other things, I want to show off that this gun actually does have a sorbothane pad in it, which is pretty cool. And this sorbothane pad is actually a pretty stiff one, so it's not normally one of those ones it's actually a little bit stiffer than 70 Duro, from what I can tell. So it doesn't necessarily need like another protector on it, so it should be just fine, especially on a plastic piston head. However, it should have a protector on it just to be safe. But it's really cool this gun does come with sorbothane on it, so shock reduction and angle of engagement correction. And I would actually have taken the cylinder head off if it wasn't so stuck on there. I cannot get it off, and I'm not going to try anymore. So yeah, they probably glued it on or something, but it's definitely staying on there. So now we're going to take a look at the angle of engagement. Now this gun, or the company that made it, boasts the fact that they come with angle of engagement corrected already. Now, when I take a look at the angle of engagement, it actually looks pretty good. I mean, it's not too far off. It's right where it should be, just about, really. I mean, to correct this, I'd have to take more time at it and actually look at it better, but it only looks like just barely off at all. And now some of you guys are questioning, why don't I have the spring in if it's sorbothane? I'm going to put it in right now to see how much change we get. Now, the sorbothane pad actually is really stiff, so I don't think it's going to change a whole lot, but we're going to check it out anyway. Doesn't look like our angle changed a whole lot, so like I said, this sorbothane pad doesn't seem to be too soft, so it's not super cushiony, so it's not going to decompress as much as other sorbothane pads will. So we're maintaining our proper angle of engagement here, or pretty close to it actually. So I'm actually liking what I see. There's no interference from the actual other tooth, so not hitting anything bad, and there's absolutely no wear on this piston or the pickup tooth on it, so pretty good angle of engagement, I will say. Good job, Crytek, you actually impressed me here. So now we can test some compression. So I got the cylinder head, tappet plate, and air nozzle, and piston head. So we're gonna test the compression. Got my whole assembly here, let's test it out. Well, it's got a little bit of a leak there, but I bet that's in the air nozzle. So I'm gonna take out the air nozzle and see what we get. pretty much perfect compression without the air nozzle on there. So if you're gonna upgrade something, I'd say upgrade the air nozzle so you can get some perfect compression going on there, and so your whole cylinder assembly will have the best compression it can possibly have. Other than that though, the piston, cylinder, and cylinder head have perfect compression. That's fantastic. As you can see here, we got some 8mm ball bearing action going on. Now, I don't like 9mm bearings, they're just too big, and 7mm bearings and 6mm bearings are just way too small for any kind of stress load. 8mm, in my opinion, is the perfect ball bearing size because you can get some modified ceramics in there, magic box bearings, any other kind of upgrade bearings, or you can just put some bushings in there for safe measures. These bearings, they seem alright to me. They're not rough, they're not, off spec or anything like that, and they spin pretty well, so they seem fine to me. However, I have heard of them already breaking in less than 10,000 rounds, which, if that's something that's going to happen to these Krytac guns, that's definitely a big blow to it. So, unless these things start breaking constantly, I would say keep them, because the one I heard about might be just a lemon, and I hope it is, because so far I'm liking everything about this gun. So, just simply put, hopefully these don't break, but if they do, replace them with 8mm bushings or some reliable bearings. But as far as I know, these should be fine. Now, how I was talking about the radiusing earlier, the radiusing on the inside is actually how it should be done. It's not stupidly done where they don't actually remove the step, but it's not overly done to where they remove too much. On the top here, they have removed the proper amount to get rid of this big step here, so they did properly radius up here. Same thing with below, they removed the entire step and nothing more. So that's really nice. I'm loving what I see so far. So far we got some sorbothane, and we have a radius gearbox shell, which seems to be pretty dang tough. So this shell should not be cracking on the stock setup. And like I said, I have not tested any of the parts in this gun before on a thorough basis, but I would say this gun could easily withstand like an M140. I'm just throwing that out there. Like, shot in the dark, that's what I'm saying it could withstand. Maybe even more, but I haven't tested it, so I can't really verify. But this gearbox shell, pre-radiused, pretty dang tough, and I'm liking it so far. So here we're gonna look at a plethora of different parts here, just so I can get them out of the way all at the same time. Okay, so we got a cutoff lever here. The cutoff lever, it looks like one of those stock cutoff levers. It's kind of unappealing. I figured they'd have like a black cutoff lever in here to kind of accent off the gearbox color, but I guess not. It's a gray cutoff lever, and it doesn't look like it's worn down a whole lot, so I'd say it's going to last you a decent amount of time, especially on this stock setup. The trigger, like I said in the previous video, seems to be just fine. There's nothing wrong going on here. Now the safety bar right here is pretty cool, so I like that they included a metal screw. I've actually seen them with plastic screws, which is just kind of dumb, I guess. And I like what's going on here. Up top, I like the trigger housing. The trigger housing kind of feels like a cheap kind of plastic, but they don't normally take a bunch of abuse. So, especially physical abuse, I don't see how it would. But it seems fine to me, so I'm not going to really complain. And as you can tell, we have our MOSFET wired in here. We have the two positive wires wired in a little differently. However, it works the same. And then we have our signal wire wired up here. Safety bar, what's really cool about it, and how they soldered what I was saying, is that it has plenty of room to actuate back and forth. It doesn't get stuck on anything, which it could be a complaint in a stock gearbox shell that has a MOSFET. They may have not done it right. But they did do this one right, and there's plenty of room to move. I'm liking it so far. And the soldering joints look actually pretty nice. They're not messy, they're pretty clean, and that's what I look for when I review a gun, really. For one of the things in the trigger housing, at least. Like I said before, the ball bearing spring guide is all metal, and it is ball bearings, which is just fantastic considering it is quick change. I'm loving it. So let's go to the spring now. Now this spring it feels like a stock spring, maybe about an M110, a weak M110 maybe. Yeah, about an M110, which is probably why it's getting around 364 FPS. Pretty dang good, actually. So nothing much going on here, it's just a stock spring, nothing that could go wrong unless it breaks, like some springs actually do. This one doesn't look like it will, so I'll say it's good. Looks good to me. And it's pretty long spring too. All things considered, I would say that the Krytac CRB and Krytac line of guns in general are the best stock guns on the market as of now. The only thing that could make this gun better is if it came with a neodymium motor. And if it came with that, I'd be completely happy with this gun. Now, the only thing I don't really like about this gun, which is kind of just stupid, is the fact that it didn't feed in full auto. And so I'm going to add a sector delay chip, and it didn't come with one, so I have to add one. Kind of a weird little thing going on here, but apparently I'm the only one who's experienced this issue. So, oh well, maybe I just got a dud and I gotta fix it. But other than that, this gun is fantastic and beats out KWA, GMP, and VFC with all the little innovative features they've added, such as the MOSFET, the angle of engagement with the sorbothane pad on the cylinder head, and the quick change spring guide, and the fact that the gears are actually shimmed nearly perfectly. It is the closest to perfection I've ever seen in a stock gun. So just absolutely fantastic. But that does it for this review, guys. I'll see you next time on whatever I review on the Airsoft Tech. See you guys later.